Please join me in prayer. Gracious and loving God, help us this day to understand and celebrate your dream for the world, to be transformed in Jesus' love, and to use our gifts to make a difference for others. Amen. I don't know about you, but I'm a little bit anxious this week, anxious about the election that is coming up. Every time I look on my phone or on the news, there's reporting about this horse race that seems to be going on, and there are people catastrophizing what happens if the other side wins. And I know that there are very real consequences to the way that this voting goes this week. And so I'm glad to be here on All Saints' Day. This day when we remember all those saints past and present who have lived in faith, even in the midst of anxious times. And we find ourselves surrounded by their prayer in the mystical communion of saints, but also given examples about how we might live in anxious times. I have two particular saints in mind today. One is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, raised in Germany, coming of age in the 1920s and 30s. He was a seminary professor. And in 1933, when the Nationalist Socialist Party, the Nazis, took power, he almost immediately became a voice of resistance against their work. And then when the churches in Germany adopted the anti-Semitic positions of the government, he resisted that official church and then went underground with many other people to found what was called the Confessing Church, because he couldn't see in that government where Christ was present. And as a matter of fact, he saw evil in that government, that evil that we all now know so clearly. Bonhoeffer continued his resistance. He had the opportunity, and indeed he did travel to the United States and to England in between, but felt compelled to come back to Germany to be a voice, to continue to teach in this underground seminary, but also to be a public voice against the Nazi regime. As you might imagine, he also met resistance from the powers that be and was finally arrested in 1943 for his work in resisting the Nazi regime and was placed in prison. Shortly before his execution in 1945, he wrote a letter from his prison cell at Christmas time. "Dear parents," he said, "above all, you must not think that I let myself fall into depression during this lonely Christmas. From a Christian point of view, a Christmas in a prison cell is no special problem. It will probably be celebrated here in this house more sincerely and with more meaning than outside, where the holiday is observed in name only. That God turns directly toward the place where people are careful to turn away. That Christ was born in a stable because he found no room in the inn. A prisoner grasps that better than someone else. For him, it is really a joyous message because he believes it. He knows that he has been placed in the Christian fellowship that breaks all bounds of time and space, and the months in prison lose importance. In anxious times, Bonhoeffer's faith, Bonhoeffer's ability to hold his situation in the greater context of God's eternal purposes helps him be present in that prison cell in a transformed way, helps him to be present in Nazi Germany with all his activity and his resistance in a powerful way. The other saint I want to remember today is Bishop Desmond Tutu, one of our favorites, and perhaps you've heard this story before. Jim Wallace, the publisher of Sojourner's Magazine, tells this story frequently because he was there when Archbishop Tutu gathered thousands of anti-apartheid activists at St. George's Cathedral in Johannesburg. And as he did in the heights of the apartheid struggle, the anti-apartheid struggle, as he did, soldiers came and lined the walls, notebooks in hand, ready to find a reason to arrest him, weapons in hand in case things got out of hand. And Jim Wallace was there. And this is how he remembers that moment. After meeting their eyes with his steady gaze, the church leader acknowledged their power, the soldiers' power. "You are powerful," he said, "very powerful," but reminded them that he served a higher power, greater than their political authority. He said, "But I serve a God who will not be mocked." Then, in the most extraordinary challenge to political tyranny that I have ever seen, Archbishop Desmond Tutu told the representatives of South African apartheid, "Since you have already lost, I invite you today and come to join the winning side." He said it with a smile in his face and enticing warmth in his invitation, but with a clarity and boldness that took everyone's breath away. The congregation's response was electric. The crowd was literally transformed by the bishop's challenge to power from a cowering fear of the heavily armed security forces that surrounded the cathedral and greatly outnumbered the band of worshipers. We literally leapt to our feet, shouted the praises of God, and began dancing. What is it about dancing that enacts and embodies the spirit of hope, Wallace asks. We danced out of the cathedral to meet the awaiting military, police, and forces of apartheid who hardly expected a confrontation with dancing worshipers. Not knowing what else to do, they backed up to provide the space for the people of faith to dance for freedom in South Africa. I could go on and on about the ways the saints of God have faced the anxious times they were in. But I think they share two qualities that we saints who are here in this moment and in this time can learn from. First of all, they lived in eternity. As those saints gathered around the throne in the reading from Revelation that we heard today, their lives are lost, as the hymn says, in wonder, love, and praise. And that praise, that sense of eternity, gives them the energy and the faith and the confidence to do the other saintly practice, which is to be present right where they are. Not in some perfect world, but in this broken world in which we live. Not in a world where everything is going our way, but in this world where there is evil and they need to resist that evil, and they do it with love and with peace. And this paradox of being able to live in eternity and to live in the present moment with power and conviction at the same time is what those saints leave us today. And so, dear people of God, on this one All Saints Day in the year 2020, 3 days from a very important election, I invite you, I urge you not to let the events of our day overwhelm your sainthood. I invite you to find those places. Julie Graham is sending out emails. If you'd like them, you can see them. Those places to rest in the eternity of God. As Julian Roach has said, to rest in that place where we know that all shall be well, and all shall be well, or a more secular version of that that says everything will come out fine in the end, and if it's not fine, it's not the end. That notion of living in the midst of this great sweep of the Spirit's work of creating and recreating the world. And at the same time, no matter what happens this week, to remember that we will still have work to do. We will still have work to do to bring forth God's realm. And my prayer is that even in the midst of this difficult time, no matter what happens this week, that we will be like those people that Bishop Tutu preached to. That we will be so reminded and caught up in recognizing the power of God that we will dance, that we will have joy. Not because things turn out the way we want them to turn out, but because we know that God is with us. And that we will have that energy to know in the days ahead what is our calling. So that the kind of world Jesus imagined in the Beatitudes today, where the poor become rich and the meek gain a sense of self-esteem and power, where the persecuted are blessed, that beloved community will come to pass.